All right. I know a number of you, and by that I mean just basically one of you, one of my buddies, and most wanted too, my amigo Afternoon 7. He and I have discussed this idea of course, we have the idea of the top 10 cars, our hit list, so we say. What about the shit list? What about the toiletest toilets in the game instead of the most awesomest cars? Haha. Of course, after some intense discussion, I think I agreed that this would be a good idea because you can't just look at the best of parts of the game. You also have to look at the very worst, the things the missed opportunities or the complete messing up of balance and skill and everything in the classes. I mean, this first, if you just look at cursory glance at this, a lot of these cars you'll see on the list, if you know how I drive and if you know what I think about a lot of these cars, it'll make sense. But the order in which they're presented in terms of levels of toiletness or level of toiletness, I'm making up words here, that may be what throws you off. So I define a car as a toilet if it A, disrupts the balance in the class so much so that other cars, even when fully upgraded, do not stand much of a chance against even a mildly upgraded version of the proverbial toilet. A car is also considered a toilet if it just does not drive in a manner that I find enjoyable, or has such glaring faults that even when it has other qualities, these glaring faults will more than make up for. You'll see this towards the bottom half of the list. So, but of course, we have to start with the toiletest toilets and work our way down to the cars that could theoretically be driven as a car. So, at the very top, we have the Hennessy Venom GT Spider. By far the most overpowered car in the exotic class, and the most overpowered car in this game. With a car that has grip levels exceeding that of the Agera and the Venom. It's from what I've seen, it's not too far below the LFA, which is one of the most grippy cars in the exotic class. And with acceleration and top speed that trumps them both, there really isn't any excuse to call this car skilled. I've literally seen nutless monkeys crash 3 or 4 times in a race and still podium against me. Yeah, obviously I usually beat idiots that drive this car, but even if you're an even remotely skilled driver, this car will take you to victory. It just totally strips any skill, especially out of the driver, and especially in the exotic class. I will never ever forgive Criterion Games for breaking the exotic class with this ultimate speed pack. I knew right away when I saw cars like when they added another Veyron and they added another Venom that this wasn't going to end well. Speaking of Veyrons, our number 2 car, while not quite as super fast at the top end as the Venom, it does have a lot more acceleration out of the hole. It puts the power down better and is still very, very overpowered. I mean, if I had $1 for every shithead I saw running Impact and Ram in this car and just, I don't even know, just Hulk smashing his way to victory. And I mean, it's, between this and the Vitesse, these cars don't take any skill either. They're ridiculously fast, and they can be made to be ridiculously strong. There's no weakness at that point. I mean, you want to talk about easy mode, these first 4 cars, the Vitesse to a lesser degree, it's just a little bit slower and a little bit weaker according to in-game statistics, but it's still way overpowered. Way overpowered for the exotic class. I mean, even in a fully upgraded Aventor, one of my favorite cars, good luck touching these cars if you have an even remotely skilled driver. It's Veyron and Veyron Vitesse. The Charger as well, actually. I want to talk about cars that break the balance for a class. Yes, of course. Well, of course, the Criterion just has to mess up the muscle class, which prior to the Terminal Velocity DLC bundle and all that stuff, we didn't have a very unbalanced muscle class. The muscle class, you could have the SL65, which was very good, and the Viper, which was also very good. And, if you're good enough, you could beat them both with the Camaro, etc., etc. But now, you have a car that is faster than both and way stronger. And it only gets stronger when people start throwing on Impact and Ram. And so now you have a car that's faster than a Raptor, and as strong, if not a little bit stronger, in the muscle class. So, again, you want to talk about easy mode? Look no further. Douchebag's car of choice, right there. I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how it doesn't matter how you slice it either. Whether you just put all lightweight racing parts, then it's way faster than anything in the muscle class. Good luck catching this with an SL or a Viper, unless you're driving against a moronic Charger driver, which there are not very many. There are more morons driving Veyrons and Venoms, thankfully, which are even more overpowered. I also, of course, it may seem odd as to why I'm putting the Agera so a little bit lower than the Veyrons and the Venom. But, unlike the Veyrons and the Venom, this car doesn't have quite as much grip. It is, however, ridiculously fast and has ridiculous acceleration. This car contributed a lot to breaking the Exotic class. In other words, the Exotic class was broken long before we had this Ultimate Speed DLC, because this and the Veyron Normal came with the game. These were the two cars that just rounded out the Exotic class, and they were head and shoulders above anything else in that class, even in stock tune, and believing that gap only gets wider when you start throwing on go-fast parts. It's not uncommon to lose to a car like this that's running impact ram and track tires and in short gears when you're running all racing stuff on a car, like the Aventador, the LFA. It's very annoying. I have very little respect for individuals that see the need to essentially cheat and use cars that take no skill and are just several cuts above. Even if cars like the Agera and the Veyron, both of them, and of course the Venom, the biggest, most overpowered car in the game, even if they were in their hyperclass cars, do you really think that would stop people from driving it in free mode when there's no restriction? Of course not. Humans are shitheads. They will go so far as to cheat to ensure their chances of winning and intentionally drive cars that don't take any skill. So that shouldn't be surprising. The only way to fix these things is to remove them completely. And then, because then once you did that, the Exotic class would be much more competitive, because then you'd have cars like the Aventador, the Zonda R, the Wyra, the 412C. Those cars are right. Obviously they'll handle a little bit differently, but in terms of speed and acceleration, they're pretty close. And then the slower cars like the LFA and the Ford GT, they wouldn't be quite as far behind because the ceiling was lower, which in effect raises the floor. And then the Exotic class could have been like the Sports class. The Sports class and the Grand Touring class remain the most balanced classes in this game, and SUVs don't really count because it's kind of whatever. I'm getting off track. Anyway, now speaking of other classes, oh yes, the Everyday class was also broken from the day Criterion delivered this game. The almighty Club Sport, the car that has been labeled the Veyron of the Everyday class, a car that is driven by both idiots and people who just want to win without working very hard for it alike, and I'd have to say I agree. Now, it's a good thing that we have the 1M and we have the Lancer Evo, but if those are the only two cars in the class that even stand a remote chance, and I do use the term remote very seriously, I can't tell you how many times I've lost to a Club Sport driver who's an idiot and who's just... his car isn't even fully upgraded. I'm not even that great of a driver myself, but I'm several cuts above average Joe Schmo. And when I lose a race that I drive perfectly, and just because someone's got a car that takes, I guess, less skill in this case, that's very annoying. This is a car. I guess this is where we begin this Club Sport. They start this idea of stripping the skill away from the game to make it easier to play and easier to win. They started all the way in the Everyday class, and then the Muscle class, they do it there. Sports class, surprisingly, they didn't. I don't know why they didn't. I'm surprised they didn't. And then obviously the Exotic class is extremely broken. Fuck that. Oh yeah, speaking of the Sports class, yes, we have now we get towards the more interesting cars that could have been, should have been, would have been not toilety if somebody just did a better job tuning them. The Diablo SV, yes, this was back when they still had the 5.7 liter V12 and it still had pop-up headlights. This is a 95 to 97 model, I believe. It can't be any later than 97. So this is one of those cars that looks good and sounds good, but if you haven't seen my test drive video by now, you'll probably want to. You'll see just how badly this car drives. This car was a huge mistake for me to even consider. But forgive me for thinking the Diablo would be bad in this game. In Hot Pursuit 2, it was fun. In High Stakes, I remember it was very fun as well. What was another game I had? I'm trying to remember. I'm sure there are other games that it was in and it was fun as well. And so, I expected it to be better. I didn't expect it to have this annoying, inconsistent, confidence-killing handling. You know, in a Countach that has much less sophisticated chassis work and suspension and brakes will inspire more confidence in this car a lot more and pull more lateral G's, etc., etc., etc. then you know that this car was designed from the outset to be a flawed creature. It was pretty quick in a straight line, and if you're going straight, it's very fun. This car really pulls. This will stick right with a 911 GT2, and this will hang with a lot of the other. This will hang with pretty much any car in the sports class, and it's fun, But God help you if you take a corner. You will regret it, I promise. Next car, yes, the Dodge Challenger SRT8 392. This car, again, it's a beautiful car. I mean, how can you not love a car like this? It's white with thick blue stripes down the middle. It's absolutely gorgeous. It sounds good too, but like many cars, it has a lot of problems. Most notably, being a lot of understeer. That's always fun, and then you also have issues with the brake locks. The brake dive as well, and the way the brakes lock very, very quickly. It's a lot like the Mustang Boss 302, which I'll discuss later here, except unlike the Boss 302, this car has much heavier steering, it's slower in a straight line, and it has less top speed. So, in other words, you get all of the cons and none of the pros. I mean, yeah, the Challenger still looks a million times sexier, but that doesn't mean anything when you're trying to do red shift at 10/10 limit and the car is just not having it. Very disappointed with this car. I expected so much more. What a disservice. Number 9. Yes, we're getting towards the less toileter toilets, or less toilety toilets here. The Ford SVT Raptor. For what it is, it's not bad. It grips a lot better than I thought it would, and I will say that, but it's got a lot of the same problems as the Challenger. It's got a very heavy front brake bias, and the front brakes will lock very, very quickly, which means when you're just trying to slow down mid-corner, just to correct your line, it just doesn't do it. The brakes lock and it spins itself out. It also has heavier steering than the Challenger, and I didn't think that was possible back when I was starting this. I'm like, oh, this thing sucks ass. This thing is so unbelievable. I mean, how much worse can it get? Oh, you'd be surprised. You would be very surprised, says the Raptor. Oh, yes, and I was. Still, at this point in the top 10 toilet lists, the cars are at least drivable. Like the Raptor, if I absolutely have to, like if I'm in an SUVs only event, I'll drive a Raptor. Okay, just all lightweight and race parts, whatever. But because it's somewhat drivable, but it's still very, very toilety. It's just, I hate the heavy steering, and I hate the front brake bias and how readily they lock. It doesn't inspire confidence. Now, this number 10 toilet here, before we get to the honorable mention, this is kind of a weird car. The Zonda R has gone more or less from the least liked, I suppose, car to, I mean, I don't know how to describe. Basically, it was on my top 10 list, and now it's been demoted. It's just switched the name of the list. It's still number 10, just on a different list. In other words, this car it's lost its appeal. It's just not. You don't need to have a car that's this wide. It's a very quick car. It's very grippy, but of course it has its issues. At least with Short Gears and Short Gears Pro, when you're going to go from 6th to 7th, it'll over rev. So you have to hit the nitrous a little bit. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you have a million other things to consider while you're racing, having another thing like that is just quite annoying. But then there's the other issue that this car is wide. This picture doesn't do it justice. It is wide at the rear. It is insane. This is probably as wide as, if not wider than, a Raptor. And this is a car that accelerates faster, brakes faster, and has a higher top speed and grips better. It also steers better. But it's just a massive target. I mean, I lost track of how many times I wrecked in this car just trying to drive it. It's just, ugh, what a shame. For shame, Pagani Zonda R. But of course now, but at least compared to those other cars, it doesn't disrupt the balance of the exotic class. At least not as much as these other cars do. At least not as much as the Veyrons and the Venom and the Agera. I mean, obviously, if you were to remove those cars, this car would also have to be nerfed quite a bit as well, because then this would be one of the only fast and grippy cars left in the class. But you see, on its own, it really isn't that big of a deal, and it's much easier to crash with. Notice how much wider it is dimensionally than... It's much wider than the Venom. It's even wider than the Veyron. I didn't think that was possible. And it's wider than the Agera, and it's longer than all of them. So, you quickly see the problem. I mean, yeah, it's a capable car, I suppose, but it's not practical. I swear to God, you will hit everything with this car. You will hit things that you didn't think were possible. And, and that does nothing but kill confidence. Now, of course... Now, we have the honorable mention here. We have the least toiletest toilet in the game, the Boss 302. I used to really like this car, but once I started driving cars that had better suspension and brake tuning, I soon realized its problems. Yeah, it's a good sounding, good looking car. Nobody here can deny that. S302 is a great looking car, if a bit heavy. But it has a lot of familiar issues. Very familiar. I mean, we have the front brake bias. Very, very heavy front brake bias to the point where it will actually scrape its front splitter on the ground. Very similar to what happens with the Ford Explorer police vehicle in PC when you drive it with mods. Not quite as the same degree. It's more like the Crown Vic, but it does it on flat ground. And so you'll find yourself just skidding, basically. The car will be squirming and skidding, and it's just under hard braking. That's just not a good thing as well. And this is another one of those cars that doesn't like curbs. This is like the LFA. If you curb it, the odds of messing up your line are very high, and the last thing you want to do is brake and curb at the same time. That will almost never end well for you. But there are good qualities though. It has decent acceleration. It's got surprisingly good amounts of grip, and the top speed isn't bad as well. But it's the handling that lets this car down. With this car, speed isn't really your enemy nor your friend. It's just the handling. I didn't think it was possible that a car with such track-ready credentials in reality could be made to drive like such a toilet in this game and have such really shitty spring rates and brake tuning. I didn't think it was possible, but I'll leave it to Criterion to just defy your expectations. So, this went on longer than I thought, but it was necessary. A lot of these needed explanation, and so I gave you one, whether you liked it or not. So this has been the top 10 toilets. I'll need to do updates to my top 10 cars list. It won't be as long, I promise. So, until next time, kiddies.